pashyati sana pusha vita bhuvat tat saviturvarenyam bhargo devasya dhimahi dhiyo yo na prachodayat. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. He who fully comprehends the truth behind all things, and he who guards over the universe, may he protect us all. We meditate on that supreme effulgence of the radiant Creator. May he inspire our intellect. Om, peace, peace, peace. That's a beautiful invocation from the Rig Veda Samhita, one of the oldest writings of humanity and one of the main sources of the teachings of the Vedanta. So today we're discussing why are we here? And as usual we start with trying to understand what the question means. What does the question mean? Well, I know I'm here because Swami Kripamananda had to go to Chicago. He's in Chicago because, as far as I know, they're observing the 150th birth anniversary of Swami Vivekananda. There's a special program. Many Swamijis are coming there. I'm sure it'll be a really nice program. So one answer, we may be asking the question, why are we here? In the sense, why are we not there? Yeah, I mean, it would be nice to go there and enjoy some holy company there. So we might be asking the question from that point of view, why are we not there? Maybe we're not there because we have other commitments. Maybe you have to be at work first thing in the morning tomorrow. Maybe cost is an issue. Maybe there are other commitments. This afternoon there's Vidya Mandir, so I can't go. So from that point of view, the answer to the question, why are we here, means we have other commitments. Other people might ask, on a Sunday morning at 11 in the morning, why are you not still in bed? Why aren't you sleeping? To us, this is sort of an obvious thing. Of course, we don't. Sunday morning we come to the Vedanta Society, but you ask a person in the general community, Sunday morning is the day, Sunday is the day you sleep in. You get up around lunchtime, if then. And so, why are we here? Yeah, why are you here? Why aren't you sleeping in? That's another way of thinking of the question. And then there's the other extreme, completely philosophical way of looking at the question, or an existential way of looking at the question. What is the purpose of life? Why are we on earth? What is human life about? Is there a cosmic design? Are we instruments in the play of God? Is there something we're supposed to do while we're here? Do we have a kind of responsibility? So that's the other extreme. Well, you can ask this question in a very, very broad interpretation. Now, this other extreme is, of course, a very meaningful and deep question, but it's also a very difficult question. It's difficult for various reasons. Main one is it's difficult because the question itself, from a purely philosophical point of view, may not even make sense. Because when you ask why something is the case, firstly, when you ask a question, you assume there's an answer. So if you ask why something, you mean there's an explanation, there's a cause. So this makes sense as long as you're dealing in the realm of causation, cause and effect. And it's not clear that once you transcend the phenomenal world, the world of causality, the question of why even makes sense. So that's a very, from most mundane to the most philosophical, it's a broad spectrum, and at one end it becomes a really difficult question, even to explain what the question means. So fortunately, I'm not going to take either of those approaches. I'm going to steer somewhere in between. So our approach is quite simple from one point of view, deep in another way. Why are we here at the Vedanta Society? That's my simple question. Not just today, not just this morning, but in general. Why are we here? So you could also ask, before we dive into that, there's yet another aspect, several dimensions of this question. You could ask, why are we here in the sense, how did we get here? What causes, not here physically, meaning this station in life, the situation that we are currently in, our position in life, what are the causes, the antecedents by which it brought us to this situation, this set of circumstances that I have to deal with in my family, in society, at work, philosophically, spiritually. How did I get here? You might be asking the question from that point of view. And I'm not going to address it from that point of view either. Rather, I'm going to ask, where are we going? So the two aspects we want to discuss is, why are we here at the Vedanta Society of Toronto? And from the point of view, where are we going? What is our goal? Okay, so that's the context in which we will discuss this question. So why are we at the Vedanta Society? Not just today, but in general. Okay, let's take a step back and ask ourselves about religious or spiritual organizations in general. Firstly, as human beings, we have need for a sense of community. We're not alone. We don't like being alone in general. We need each other. We need the company of others. And not just anyone, we need the company of like-minded people, compatible people. So those who have interest in some kind of common goal. And as I said, it's because in general human beings are not islands. We're not an island. We're all interdependent, not independent. This whole idea, although at times we feel like we wish we could just be alone and people would let us alone, but this is in general a temporary feeling, and you rather have the company of people. There's no such thing as a self-made man or self-made woman. We are all dependent and on each other. We need each other. An example is given if one thinks that one is independent, one can do things on their own. We can give a simple task. Take a button on your shirt. Button on your shirt. Quite a simple thing. I'm not talking about rocket science. I'm not talking about something very sophisticated. A button on your shirt. Can you make it on your own? Can you make a button on your own? Well, you think it's simple, but it's not. As you realize, if you can't take the help of anyone, it's pretty hard. So that shows from the most simplest aspects of our life, we depend on others very much. So we are all interdependent. And that means, of course, that we can't take others for granted, and similarly, they can't take us for granted. We are all very important to each other for our well-being. So the first point is that we need a sense of community. But now, what kind of community? Well, we've already said they've got to be like-minded people, but there are many kinds of communities of that kind, that satisfy that criterion. There are social communities, there are professional communities, there are recreational communities. People belong to a golf club or a tennis club, or go to a gym together. There are extended family. If you have a big family, you have cousins and second cousins and triple cousins and going on in all sorts of directions. That's a community. There are political communities. You may belong to a party or an organization which has a political agenda. All of these do address our need for community in different kinds of ways. But then what is a religious community? What need does a religious community address? So in all of these other things, it's clear. If I belong to a golf club, for example, it addresses my need to play with other people a common sport. But religious communities, what need do they address? Well, it may start with actually some needs about our lives that are at first personal, but also have a social component or social relevance. For example, many people go to a religious community for various sacraments of life, birth ceremony. If somebody's born in their family, you want a ceremony performed. Some people go for a death ceremony. Some people go for a marriage ceremony, a coming of age ceremony, a upanayam or a bar mitzvah. So all of these are different ceremonies, sacraments that we feel the need of a religious community to initiate and to conduct. They are personal events, but they belong to your family or to an individual, and yet we want them to be performed in a social context and in a religious context. Why? Because we want the acknowledgement of a certain event, a social acknowledgement. We want blessings in a certain aspect, and we want guidance of the community. And beyond the actual community, that is the other people who are there, we want a priest. In a religious community, you want sacraments to be performed, you need a priest. And the priest will maybe invoke a certain spiritual presence, say prayers, invoke the blessings of God, and distribute the blessings for everyone. So it's not enough just to have the blessings of society, of our fellow citizens in the society, but also something more. We need to invoke the blessings of something beyond that. So we go to a religious community, at first at least, religious community organization for various sacraments of life. So this then, now with that in mind, we come to the Vedanta Society. And why do we come here? We don't perform any of those sacraments. We don't have a priest, we have a monk. And the monk has become a monk by surrendering the rights to perform those actions, those ceremonies. If you want a birth, somebody's born in your family, you want Swami to do something, he'll say, go to a temple, get it done, and you'll come here and then we'll bless you. He'll do it. Blessings are always there, but the sacraments are not done here. So why do we come here then? Well, there is another aspect of religious communities. It may start with sacraments, but there's another idea, namely the community of shared beliefs. Certain beliefs that we hold that are shared by other members of the community. So in most places of worship, you may go there initially for sacraments, but then you find yourself in a group that has shared beliefs, that believe in things similar to what you believe in. And by mixing with that community, by spending time with them, those beliefs get reinforced, both for us as individuals and for our families and for our friends. And that congregational aspect, the fact that we're in a community in which we are reinforcing our beliefs, may happen through various activities such as music, prayer, worship, discussion, discourse, contemplation, and most importantly, food. Now, you may think it's odd that I added food at the end of that list, but in fact it's quite important. This idea of these various things, doing them together, adds tremendously to cohesion of a group. There's, I think we discussed once before, there is this Mother Teresa, I think was the one who said, the family that prays together stays together. That is, praying together, either in a family or in an extended family, in a community, builds cohesion. And to that we added the family that eats together stays together too. So whether again it's in our small family or in our extended family of our community, food is actually quite important. Now all of these aspects that we just discovered have both a social and a personal component. You can pray at home, you can sing at home, you can worship at home, you can have discussions at home. If you're alone, you can have discussions with yourself. All of those things have a personal aspect, and yet there is something also to be gained by doing it in a larger group, in a congregation. So we can do them at home as well as in a place of worship. And both of these are necessary for our stability and our growth, especially in the spiritual dimension. Why? Especially in a larger community, it's important because we learn through example. Sometimes things are not clear to us through our own reflection and our own analysis, but by hearing others, even by observing others, we learn something and it becomes clearer to us. So this learning through example is very important gain in a community. And we shouldn't forget that as we learn from others, others learn from us as well. We are both teacher and student at the same time. So in a community, that very profound process actually is constantly going on. Okay, so now if then we're talking about we go to a place of worship or a religious institution because of shared beliefs, that brings us to the question, why do we come here, Vedanta Society? What are our shared beliefs? So this is an interesting question. What do we believe in? Let me summarize as I understand it, what are our core beliefs? Firstly, we believe God is real and can be experienced. God is real and can be experienced. And we see this as the essence of Sri Ramakrishna's life and teachings. If you distill everything we know about his life and about what he taught, it comes down to that one or two statements. God is real and can be experienced. We know how in the Kali temple first, he would come and ask the image, talk to the image at first, say, Mother, are you real? You know, that question consumed him. Is it just a image that we're worshipping? Or is there a spiritual reality behind it? And you know, until he got that answer, that was the one focus that of his both waking and sleeping moments. He was always asking that question. And at the end of the day, he'd agonize that he had not yet been able to answer this question. Another day has gone, but I have not yet seen you. I don't have this answer. And so much in agony was he that people would observe him and think, he's crying for mother. Maybe he lost his earthly mother, but actually he was crying for the divine mother. And you know that before his first experience in the Dakshineswar temple, he was ready to end his life out of that agony that he had not realized God. He felt that life itself had no meaning without the experience of God. And so he rushed at that image where Kali was holding the sword and was ready to literally end his life, at which point he had that interesting experience, a very, very profound and interesting experience as described in his own words. What amazes me about it is that when he regained normal consciousness, and he described that experience, he said, waves and waves of light rushed towards him and engulfed him. Very interesting statement. He didn't talk about the Divine Mother appeared with this many arms and this many heads. He said, waves and waves of light rushed towards him and engulfed him. But by the end of that experience, he had a firm conviction that the Divine Mother is real. Now the disciples of Sri Ramakrishna were drawn to him by the same question. You know the story of Swami Vivekananda, Narendranath, what kind of agony he was in. He was searching for actual experience. He joined the Brahmos, thinking that would show the Brahmo Samaj, thinking that would show him that would fulfill his aspirations, but the ideal was not enough for him. He turned to philosophy, both Eastern and Western. Philosophy was not enough for him. Until he imposed himself forcefully on leaders of religion and asked them a blunt question that made them speechless. Have you seen God? We talk about God, we discuss God, but his question is, have you seen God? And that took them by surprise. Most of them didn't have an answer, of course, until he met Sri Ramakrishna. And what did Sri Ramakrishna say in response to that? Have you seen God? He didn't say, I saw God. He said, I see God. I see him. And he said, I see him more clearly than I see you. That is, it is a constant and intense experience. Moreover, he said, I can show him to you. So this is the twin ideal here in Sri Ramakrishna. His whole life represents God is real and can be experienced. And Sri Ramakrishna taught this not just to Narendranath and his close disciples, but to everyone. He made it clear So this idea that God is real and can be experienced was an idea that he gave to everyone. So once again, God is real and can be experienced, and the goal of life is this direct experience. Then he added some details to that. All religions of the world have this one ideal, namely the experience of God. Clearly or not so clearly stated, but that's the one goal. And from this point of view, all religions are harmonious. It's important to understand, by the way, I find there's some confusion in this regard. Sri Ramakrishna's teaching of the harmony of religions is not to say that all religions are the same. That's not what he said. He said the goal of all religions is the same. That is, there is a spiritual reality, and all religions are attempts to reach that goal. He didn't say that the dogma of all religions is the same, or the ritual of all religions is the same, or the theology is the same. As you know, Swami Vivekananda, in giving a talk, actually in a church in America, stood up and said, "Ye divinities on earth, sinners?" As you know, it's a fundamental tenet of Christian theology, not what Christ said. Christian theology, that the concept of original sin, everyone is a sinner, and that they need to get redemption through Christ. But standing in a church, he said, it is a sin to call a man a sinner. Now this is Swami Vivekananda, he's Sri Ramakrishna's disciple, and so you could, if he says something, you can understand he's reflecting the teaching of Sri Ramakrishna. So the harmony of religions doesn't mean that all the dogmas are the same or that you need to harmonize them. The goal is the same, namely the realization of God. So it's harmonious in that point of view, in the sense that there are many approaches to the same goal. This is like the Rigvedic mantra, Ekam Sat Vipra Bahuda Vadanti, that we repeat often. That is, truth is one, or being is one. Sat is actually being. Being not as a verb, but as a noun. The being is one, and wise people, Vipra, wise people, speak of it in many ways. And it also comes in the Gita, Ye Yadhamam Pratakjante Tam Sudeva Pajamyam. Then as people approach me through diverse paths, I reach them. So this is Sri Ramakrishna, and it was clear in the way he presented it that if we make an effort to reach that goal, that there is help available. Help available not necessarily in the way we understand it, in either an intellectual way, but even in a spiritual way. And Sri Ramakrishna expressed this in the sense, if you take one step towards God, he takes 10 steps towards you. That is, it really doesn't matter whether we understand what that means, but the idea is that there is a fundamental relationship between us and God, and that our effort to reach that will be reciprocated. Now some people go further than this and think that Sri Ramakrishna himself will help us. Maybe. He himself said that, he who thinks on me shall inherit my wealth even as a son does inherit his wealth, and my wealth is Viveka, Vairagya, Bhakti, Gnana. So he did say that. Some even go further and call him an avatar, that is a direct manifestation of the ultimate reality. Whether these are or not, whether you want to accept them or not, it's up to you. Which helps you, you can do that. But his fundamental teaching is this: God is real and can be experienced, not by some, but by all. So that's the first thing we believe in when we come here. Second thing that we believe in is that God is not restricted to an image or a symbol. The Upanishad speaks of it. Sarvam Khalvidam Brahma. That is, everything is a manifestation of Brahma. What is Brahma? Brahma comes from the Sanskrit root Brihi. Brihi means vast, that which is vast. Brihadaranyaka means vast or large forest. Brahma is derived from this, that which is vast and expansive, that being. Sarvam Kalvidam Brahman. Sarvam, means everything, and Idam means this. What is this word? Kalvidam is a sandhi, a joining of two words, Kalu and Idam. Now, what is this word Kalu? The Rishi didn't say Sarvam Idam Brahman. Everything here is Brahman. He could have. That makes perfect sense. Grammatically, it's a complete statement. It's a meaningful statement. What is this word Khalu? Khalu is a statement like in English it's translated sort of like, isn't it? Don't you agree? So the Rishi, whoever it is who experienced this, felt there is so excited by it, so enthusiastic about it to share it with others that he added Sarvam Vidam Brahman Khalu. Isn't it? So it's a very, very profound statement in the Upanishad, and it means therefore that the God that Sri Ramakrishna said is real and can be experienced is not restricted to an image or a symbol. By the way, this idea of being overjoyed or overwhelmed by that realization is a common experience. You find many instances of it. In the life of Sri Ramakrishna, Hriday was the nephew of Sri Ramakrishna and his close attendant. He took care of him for over many years. At one point, Hriday realized Sri Ramakrishna is obviously a very, very deep spiritual person, and he is getting direct experience, and he prayed to him, I don't have any experience of my own. Can't you do something for me? Can't you show me the Divine Mother too? So he said this many times until finally Sri Ramakrishna said, okay, and he touched him. Now Sri Ramakrishna's touch, we know, was very magical in a way. If you read the Kadamritam carefully, you'll see how his touch sort of produces a profound influence on the person receiving that. Anyway, he touched Hriday. Hriday at once felt what? He did his description in Lila Prasanga. He felt he was made of light. And he felt everything else around him was made of light. And in that moment of realization, what does he do? He starts shouting, hey Ramakrishna, let's go around the world. Look, we are made of light. Let's go tell everyone. Let's go all over the world and tell. And he was shouting like this until Sri Ramakrishna came and touched him again and said, be your dull self again. and that momentary experience left him. But the point is that the experience, according to our teachers, what they tell us is that experience is overwhelming and you react instantly to it, that somehow you have to say something about it. So the Rishi here is also saying, Sarvam Vidam Brahman Khalu. So the Upanishad tells us that God is not restricted to the image or a symbol. God that appeared at first to be so distant and aloof from us, difficult to reach, according to this, is here and now, and our very essence. Tattvamasi, Taittiriya Upanishad says, that thou art, that being, you are. Again, you may think, I don't feel that way. How can it be possible that divinity is within me? Well, you can make it plausible to yourself, even before your experience. You can make it plausible to yourself in two ways. One, psychologically, and second is philosophically. Psychologically, we say that there's a principle that the world is a reflection of my mind. As my mind is set, so I see the world. And you can yourself derive many arguments in favor of that. Okay, I see the world according to my mind. Swami Vivekananda gives the example. Suppose there is a baby in the room and a thief enters to steal something. The baby doesn't have a concept of the thief, and so the thief is taking things, and maybe the baby will also hand him something, because it doesn't have an idea somebody stealing something. On the other hand, if we are there, we will feel, even if somebody legitimately who belongs in that room comes in, but we don't know them, we'll have a doubt in our mind, is this person a thief? Why? Because there's a concept of thief in our life. So Swami Vivekananda gives this discussion. But you can turn that discussion around in a positive way. If I see thief outside because I have a thief in my mind, then when I see holiness outside, what does it tell me? And we all of us recognize holiness. We come here for holy company. We talk to Swami, we meet people who are advanced in spiritual life. Why? Why is it that we're able to recognize holiness outside? because that holiness is inside. So, from a psychological point of view, the idea of Tattvamasi can be made plausible. It can also be made plausible from a philosophical point of view. If you analyze yourself, you say, I don't feel like I'm divine, a manifestation of divinity. I don't feel like I'm an embodiment of divinity. Then ask yourself, who are you? And in that analysis, we can ask ourselves, am I this body that I'm seeing here? Am I the mind? You can understand that quite easily, at least at the philosophical level, that you're neither body nor mind. How do you know you're not the body? Well, take out your old photo albums. Look at your pictures from when you were a little baby to now. You'll point to all of those and say, that's me. But the body is completely different. I had a little body when I was a baby, bigger one now. Body has constantly changed, but it's me. So that shows that there is something which is, my identity is not limited to the body. Similarly with thoughts. How do I know I'm not the thoughts? Because I'm the witness of the thoughts. Thoughts are constantly coming and going. If I was equal to the thoughts, then my presence would be oscillating as well. But it doesn't. I'm the witness of all those thoughts. So philosophically, you can argue that I'm neither body nor mind. Now, if you're neither body nor mind, what are you? The answer is, as far as I'm aware, at least what remains if you remove body and mind, according to Vedanta, what remains is consciousness, awareness. And it is that awareness that the Upanishad asks you to explore and says that's where the divinity is. So we as aware beings, our consciousness, and even more than consciousness, kind of loving consciousness, are a manifestation of divinity. So from a philosophical point of view, you can come to that kind of explanation. So that's the second thing. The first one was God is real, it can be experienced. Second is God is not restricted to an image or a symbol. And then the third thing comes, how do we realize it? If we come that far, if we believe all of that, then the third question is, how do we realize it? And here the answer is yoga. Yoga is the means by which to unite ourselves with our goal. And Swami Vivekananda made a science of this whole process. He explained it in a very, very interesting, organized, analytic way. What did he say? Each soul is potentially divine. The goal of life is to manifest that divinity. How? Do this by work, or worship, or psychic control, or philosophy. By one, or more, or all of these, and be free. This is the whole of religion. Doctrines, dogmas, books, rituals are but secondary details. So he gave us the principles, almost like a scientific approach to it. You can start with belief, but our goal actually is religion. Now Swami Vivekananda has, in this one line, do this by work, worship, psychic control, or philosophy, has actually explained to us a new classification of yoga. Actually, the classification existed in some way, even in the Gita and in prior works, but he brought it out and formalized it. These different yogas that he's talking about are ways by which the energies within us can be channelized towards our spiritual journey. So there is how we act. You can take the way you act and turn it into a spiritual discipline. We all act in some way, but there's an efficient way, or there's a way of acting in such a way that we don't fritter away our energies, and so that every single act that we do helps us move towards a spiritual goal. You see, you must take action into account in your spiritual disciplines because most of your day is spent in that regard. So that's the yoga of action. And its fundamental idea is that you're trying to transcend the notion of selfishness. In this yoga of action, the fundamental aim is somehow to transcend selfishness. Why? Because when we transcend selfishness, we are redefining the concept of self. Who am I? Next is I'm going to go a little fast since we're running out of time. Next is the idea of devotion, the yoga of devotion. Here, the idea is to take our emotional energy, which also is being put into diverse directions, some quite unhelpful, and to channelize that towards the spirit. Now, it is said that devotion is most easily, emotional energy, which expresses itself in the form of devotion, is most easily evoked through music. And that's a very interesting principle, that the yoga of devotion, or the yoga of channelizing emotional energy, which can be done largely through music. The third is the yoga of psychic control, what he said, psychic control. This, in some sense, is a majestic path. That's why it's called Raj Yoga. It's a royal road. And it's interesting that the devotional path requires you to have some belief in God. But the path of psychic control, or contemplation meditation, you can be an atheist. The way Patanjali has described the yoga in the Yoga Sutras, it can be done purely psychologically, with having no belief in God. But the main thing is the mind, the taming the directions of the mind. As you know, in Kathopanishad, it says, Manasai Vedamaptavyam. Through mind alone, it is realized. So this yoga of psychic control addresses the energies of the mind. And finally, there is the philosophical approach. We all have intellectual power. All of us have intellectual power. So the yoga of philosophy, the Gnana Yoga, says, why don't we channelize that intellectual power in a way that will help us to realize God. So these kind of questions like we were asking, who am I? Am I the body? That kind of philosophical analysis helps us in our spiritual path. So Swami Vivekananda put this forward in a very beautifully scientific way. He gave spiritual disciplines for each of these. And what he also observed is that practically all religious traditions can be classified into this paradigm. That is, the spiritual disciplines of practically all religious traditions can be fitted into this paradigm of the four yogas. And it's interesting, by the activities of the Vedanta Society actually mirror exactly those four yogas. See, we have days when we have a vigil, so we do meditation or japam from morning to evening, that's our Raj Yoga. Then we have days where we have seminars and discussion groups, that's for Gnana Yoga. Then we have worship, days of worship for Bhakti Yoga. And then we have volunteer opportunities for the various centers run through our soup kitchens, our food bank, maintaining the building and so on. That's for Karma Yoga. And they're all, so therefore that's why the activities are structured as they are. And then for the Sunday service, which is sort of the centerpiece of the society, is trying to integrate all of those. We have a little bit of devotional music, then we have a little bit of reading, a little bit of discussion, and a little bit of meditation, and then Menaka usually invites us all to do a little bit of Karma Yoga too. So that's the idea of the way the service is structured. Now, it's important that Swami Vivekananda, when he explained these four yogas, there are some dangers in the path also that you have to be aware of. Actually, each yoga by itself is sufficiently rich to take us to the goal. But in most cases, a single yoga is not enough because of various pitfalls. For example, if you just stick to Gnana Yoga, the problem is you can become an armchair philosopher. You can become dry intellectualism. It's not going anywhere. If you just do Bhakti Yoga, you only come to the worships. The problem is that you may lose yourself in sentimentalism. You have all sorts of emotional explanations for things. If you do Raj Yoga alone, a person wants to meditate, day and night, they start telling you all sorts of weird things. They talking about spooks and forces, and one devotee was telling me, hey, you have an aura of such and such a color. I was like, really? Do I? I didn't know that. So Raj Yoga by itself, there's a danger there, and Karma Yoga by itself, it has the danger of making us self-righteous. We become do-gooders. So each of these, there is a danger. And Swami Vivekananda's solution for that is integrate them. Integrate them, and then you will be able to, each one will balance the other. However, that integration is not so simple. The synthesis of the yogas is not as simple as you may think at first. It's sort of, Swami Chagananda gave his following example. Suppose I read in a nutrition guide so that these foods are very nutritious for me. So I just throw them into no mess and mix them up and try to consume them, thinking this is really healthy for me. Actually, it depends what can you assimilate. Some things that are healthy may be not appropriate for you because my system cannot assimilate those things. So that synthesis has to be done with a lot of thought and attention. This brings us then to the next idea, which where synthesis plays an important part. The next thing we believe in, namely, the God that is within me is the same God in everyone. So far we had Sri Ramakrishna telling us God is real, can be realized. Swami Vivekananda telling us, yes, that God that's real is in you, and you can realize it through yoga. And then we come to the principle, the God within me is the same God in everyone, and we have Holy Mother telling us, there is that. How do you recognize that? Our simple teaching is this, which actually contributes to the synthesis of the yogas, namely, make everyone your own. The interconnectedness of me and everyone else, my spirit with your spirit, is at a very deep spiritual level, is expressed in the most simple language by Holy Mother. It says, make everyone your own. So these are our core beliefs. And finally, there's one more that sort of puts all of these together. What happens after you realize God? So Holy Mother again says, how do you know somebody has realized God? You don't grow two horns. What does she mean by that? It means nothing weird happens. You say, I have a halo, and I have the vision of God, and now, I say, be thou cured, and you become a cure, like a cure miracle, they can produce ash from thin air. None of those things happen. You don't grow two horns, meaning realization of God doesn't make you weird in some way. What does she say? She says, realize God, you become all-loving, deeply concerned about the well-being of others, and unselfish. That's what happens. And so this part of our spiritual journey is also very important. What happens after realization? You must act in the light of that realization. You see, how do we know that the personal experience of God is not the end of your spiritual journey? If it were, the Gita would have ended in chapter 11. Chapter 11 is where the Vishwarupa Darshanam happens. Arjuna experiences that ultimate reality. Gita goes on for a full 7 more chapters. The point here is the same thing that Sri Ramakrishna emphasized to Swami Vivekananda and Swami Vivekananda emphasized to us. When Sri Ramakrishna asked Swami Vivekananda what did he want, he said, I want to be immersed in samadhi, I want to be experienced continuously with divine presence. And he said, that's not the highest ideal. You have to see God with open eyes, and you have to be able to communicate that to others. So Swami Vivekananda expressed that in this following way. He had a twin ideal for the Ramakrishna mission, which means for everyone, monks and householders, a twin ideal for one's own realization and for the well-being of the world. So we cannot forget that second thing, and he expressed it more succinctly as be and make. I don't know how many here, some of you knew Swami Pramadhananda. He would write in his letters, whenever he wrote a letter, he put it right at the top, be and make. That was the idea that he wanted us to remember. Be and make, that means part of this, your own realization, but also translate that into action in such a way that it communicates to others. We communicate not just through words or action, of course, the loudest way, the most eloquent way that we communicate our ideas. But the words are also important. So some are by actions, but some also by explicit efforts. This explicit effort has now found a manifestation or realization or expression in the Vedanta society. It's called the Vidya Mandir. The Vidya Mandir is our effort to communicate these ideas to those who are coming after us. I've often said, I've told you before, some people think I exaggerate this, but it's not an exaggeration, I think, that the Vidya Mandir, the school that the society operates, is the most important activity that we're involved in. In all of the other things, largely we're preaching to the choir. You see, well, after a while you get used to it. You've heard the same stories, you've read the same books, and you more or less know what I'm going to say. In fact, one Swami was visiting last week and he said it becomes harder and harder to give lectures because the devotees know the stories better than you do. But the Vidya Mandir attempts to say, let me take those ideas and see if I can communicate them to the next generation. Why is that a challenge and also important? Next generation doesn't speak the same language we do. They don't have the same cultural milieu that we do. After a while, what I mean by preaching to the choir is, we get comfortable with the principles as embodied in a kind of cultural context and a kind of, so the sort of baggage starts accumulating around it. And we lose sight of what is principle and what is baggage. Some people come here and say, you must bow down to the altar. Bow down to the altar if you want, if you feel so inclined. If you don't, so what? I mean, you understand the teachings and try to live up to them. So this is what I mean about being able to separate the principles from the baggage. In Vidya Mandir, we have to do that because we're often communicating to youngsters who, because of their particular situation, where they're growing up, how they're growing up, ask basic questions, are not ready to accept without thinking the baggage that goes with things. And when we try to explain what happens, we are forced to analyze things ourselves. Things that we took for granted, we are actually forced to stop and think, just a minute, what part of this is really the essence and what part is just something I sort of got added on because of where I came from, my background, my experience. So this seems to me it's an extremely important part of why we are here. So then to summarize, why are we here? We're here because of our shared beliefs and we want to realize those beliefs. Those beliefs are God is real and can be realized, as taught by Sri Ramakrishna. God is our essence and yoga is the means to manifest it, as taught by Swami Vivekananda. The God within me is the same God within everyone, as taught by Holy Mother. And that those principles have to be realized and practiced and communicated, be and make. And with that realization, we will act. May Sri Ramakrishna bless us so that we stay focused on the essentials of spiritual life and understand why it is we come here to this very unique place called Vedanta.